This episode is brought to you by Rad Dudes Who Love Nature.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Billy Brown.
Hey, I'm Tony Crosdale.
And I'm Nelson Melendez.
Welcome, Nelson. Nelson, who are you?
So I'm a graduate student at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, and I was asked today to speak a little bit about my research with the endangered bog turtle, which is an endangered turtle species that's found in the Northeast.
Well, mostly we just wanted you to hang out and add some commentary to what we're doing here today.
Because we're going to get sick with each other, so we bring it. We keep it live.
You're a biology unicorn.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's nice to be here today and to add some, my own little knowledge to everything that you guys do.
Do you know what unicorn means?
I can guess.
Okay, we're going to leave it at that.
You specifically have, you track these bog turtles. So, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about two different organisms that were tracked. One with radio collars, one with GPS units. So you could add a little bit of, feedback and help us understand how tracking animals works.
Definitely, yeah.
So we're going to start with comments. We've got a comment from Ian Helmswich from Lincolnshire in the UK. He says, great show, but you guys should check out the Kew Gardens History of London through 100 lichens, which sounds absolutely thrilling. In a minute, we're going to shift to hearing about a journal that when we started talking to people, when we started talking to people in general, but also to the guy, Chris Mowry, who's the Coyote guy we're going to hear from in this episode, he mentioned this. And then a couple other people emailed us around the same time about the launch of a journal called The Urban Naturalist, which seemed totally in our wheelhouse.
What's also funny is your column for Grid.
I had a column for a while called The Urban Naturalist. Yeah, so...
and I had a blog called The Radical Naturalist.
There you go. We're naturalists all over.
And not the nudist kind, not that we're opposed to that.
But we are going to listen to an interview with someone from The Urban Naturalist, Keith Goldfarb, and we'll do that now.
Sure. I'm Keith Goldfarb, and I'm the editor-in-chief of The Urban Naturalist, as well as a number of other natural history and archaeological journals, but our newest one is The Urban Naturalist, which focuses on natural history of urban areas throughout the world.
I was going to compliment your herpetology focus so far.
No, the first two were on herpetology. The first one was on scour holes in the southeastern U.S. and how they're potentially important habitats for a lot of herp species. And the second one is looking at lizard communities in Phoenix, Arizona. So there's been we don't have any control over the content. It's what we get, and so that just shows that at least there is certainly a strong herp focus among urban researchers. And I know there's also, at least from what I've seen from the northeast and southeastern naturalists, there's been recently a fairly strong, large mammal, with coyotes and other animals actually kind of coming into the urban spaces. As urban spaces grow, they come in more and more contact with what have been more natural communities, quote unquote. And so you just get species coming in that might not have previously been found there and adapting.
Yeah, and I think we're also seeing maybe some of the, or at least my sense in talking to the coyote guys and reading up at least on large predators in, let's say, Los Angeles area is because if we're not so actively hunting them, then it's sort of they rebound.
Definitely. And also they start to realize that there's tremendous natural resources there for them. I mean, they're not natural, but tremendous, food resources that.
Well, but it's a fun discussion topic of what is it then? Is it natural? Is it? What is it?
Oh yeah, no. And I mean, you look at for example, you look at a forest of any sort, a spruce forest that grows up in what had formerly been a field. The spruce forest is dramatically altering the landscape.
Yeah.
And so we're a species that's dramatically altering the landscape, and I think from my opinion, it's not so much an issue of what's natural and what's not. It's just if you value the diversity of landscapes, you don't want anything to become too dominant. And I think that's the question, is when one particular species has too much of an impact that it tends to wipe out certain other habitats that are no longer available. And that's, I think, for me, where the concern would come in. I mean, if the whole world got covered with spruce forests, I wouldn't think that'd be a good thing, because suddenly the diversity would go down to, much less than it is now. I wouldn't think of the spruce as evil. It's just not a desirable situation, I think, in terms of both overall sustainability for the planet, as well as for a number of species that would probably die off because they couldn't be adapted to that. And it's the same true with humans as a potentially major influencing species on the planet.
Yeah, but it's our own private monoculture, So a broader question about natural history for you guys as publishers of natural history journals. There's been some writing lately sort of pointing out the decline of natural history as a discipline within biology, I guess. And that as people focus more and more on molecular studies and on modeling, that there's less of researchers getting out there, or students getting out there and getting their hands dirty. And here you guys are expanding.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think what we're seeing would kind of a little bit call into question that view. I think what I do see is perhaps maybe less of what one might say is traditional natural history, where you're just kind of a naturalist who's studying it just for the sake of studying it. There's probably more applied stuff going on now.
Okay.
And so you might, in some ways that way it's kind of shifting. But in terms of actually people doing field work and natural history that way, I mean, modeling, that can be natural history too. And we get a lot of articles that certainly incorporate a lot of modeling, although they often have field components as well to get the data. But it's all part of it, and we don't necessarily distinguish. But almost all our articles have a fairly strong field component to it. And we've been getting increased submissions across the board. So that would seem to indicate that there's still certainly a lot of active research going on that, by anyone's fairly broad definition, would be pretty strong natural history.
I appreciate it. So I guess that wraps up sort of the questions I had prepared and was thinking of. Do you have anything that you'd like to mention?
No, the only thing is for those who are interested in the natural history of urban areas, we strongly recommend you check out Urban Naturalist's website. While the articles they're peer-reviewed scientific papers, so they're not all necessarily easy reading along the lines of something like a National Geographic. They're intended for the research community. Still, many of them have stuff that'll be of interest to a wide range of people. And to get the journal going and off to as much of a start as it can, we're having it be open access. So for now, anyone can access the articles without a subscription. And so I'll just give the website as www.eaglehill.us. That's a .us site /URNA. That's ERNA. It stands for Urban Naturalist. So www.eaglehill.us/ERNA. And on the homepage, you'll see on the right-hand side is a click for the articles. And for those researchers who may be listening, it's an excellent place to get your research out there.
So that's about it. I just want to thank you very much for the time to talk to me. And
thank you for talking to me and for all your good work in promoting enthusiasm about urban natural history in Philadelphia and elsewhere.
So that was neat. I mean, I think it's something that we might try to work in as we go forward, looking at articles that they have as discussion points.
I like that we talk about the different ways to interpret urban, nature.
Yeah.
But he's talking a lot about how these animals are as cities get developed, animals are kind of forced to come in. How's also
but not just forced, but just that urban landscapes provide resources to sort of, let's call them wild or native animals that as long as we're not actively killing them, or if there isn't something about a city that precludes their sort of exploiting those resources, they'll exploit them.
Right, that's what I was getting at.
So the coyote is an example of that. Yeah.
Right, and just red-tailed hawk. I think it just took them a while to stop getting killed and just getting used to the cities and different ones, like the behaviors to avoid human activity were selected out, and some started coming.
Well, that's an interesting question, because you just hit on the whole topic of whether whether the animals that are living well in cities are selected, are somehow evolving in ways that make them more adapted to cities.
Right. I mean, there's
Or are they learning behaviors, or is it a question of like evolution, or is it a question of what's the right word I'm looking for?
Nurture.
Nurture, or some kind of plasticity that they can adapt. We're going to talk to. We're going to hear an interview from a couple really neat, really college students, which is what we sort of hit us midway through the interview. We're talking not to like PhD candidates or something about a cat tracking study based out of Raleigh-Durham area, but sort of with national and international scope.
Wait, Raleigh-Durham, what a great area for urban wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cool area.
All right, no problem. My name is Troy Perkins. I'm actually the head project coordinator for Cat Tracker. I deal with loaning out units to participants within the Raleigh-Durham area, and also as well as being a correspondent for do-it-yourself participants.
Okay. And Rihanna, how about you?
I'm Rihanna Gale, and I am the head coordinator for the Long Island participants.
Both Rihanna and I are undertaking this project as undergrad research. Mm-hmm. I'm right now a senior double majoring in zoology and fishery and wildlife science at NC State University, while Rihanna...
Well, I am a senior in natural resources concentration policy.
How did your project start?
This project kind of got started out of simple curiosity between two people. Our director of Museum of Natural Sciences, his name's Roland Kays. He's been friends with one of the directors for the labs over at North Carolina State University, Rob Dunn. He runs your wildlife program at NC State. Rob decided that he was going to go on vacation, and he had always wondered about where his cat Chicha went. So Roland, being the animal tracker he is, decided, let's just put a GPS unit on a cat, see where the cat goes. So that's what they indeed did. They put a GPS unit on Chicha, and while Dunn was gone on vacation, Chicha went out and about, did her normal thing. We got the unit back and the GPS data, downloaded it, and we found this one point that was just really far out there. We thought it was GPS error. Come to find out, when Rob took a look at it, he was like, oh my God, that's where we used to live, about a mile away. So Chicha had traveled so far away, and we were all like, wow, if this is what cats are really doing, you know, they could be affecting potentially a large area for wildlife. So we decided it would be really cool to put GPS units on people's pet indoor-outdoor cats and see where these cats went, if they were affecting native wildlife areas or if they were just hanging out in the alleys around the house, where they were actually going.
Oh, so this project from the start was about cat impact on wildlife.
Yes.
Are we tilting with that when we say that? Is it like, you know, because I think Tony and I are coming in with our bias to other wildlife. You know, I'm a vegetarian, for God's sake, and I still want to kill all the cats. But I've noticed you guys are pretty gentle in your literature and how you present it. You don't seem to be coming at this from like, you know, cats are out of control predators, but it seems to be more sensitively posed. I mean, how do you guys look at it?
So typically we want to look at it with kind of a non-biased perspective. As scientists, we understand that cats are a predator and they're going out and they're affecting wildlife. We understand that, but we want to look more, I guess, in presenting it for our research in a more, how do you put it, like like biased way about cats will kill everything. That way we can get cat owners to participate with us. We don't want to be judging cat owners ahead of time and being like, oh, shame on you for letting out your cats, but will you still help us track your cats? So it's a very fine line that we try to walk.
And maybe we should get all our cats on the table here. I don't actually have any cats. Tony, how many do you have?
Well, I have one. I own one myself, Lola, and I live with another one, Spaz.
Rihanna, how many cats do you have?
I actually have no cats. And Troy here has two.
I have two cats. They live with my boyfriend's parents right now, but they are both indoor cats. I do, however, have contradictions myself from my own personal life, as there's 3 TNR cats outside my apartment, and I do feed them. But I also have a bird feeder because I love my songbirds. And it's conflicting because finally reality came knocking on my door when one of the cats decided to leave me a nice little, feathery present by my door.
So what are you guys finding in the study?
So far, pretty much the cats that we track, they all tend to stay right around the house. They're not venturing out in the forest. They're not going into nature preserves. They're sticking really close to the house, and it's been quite interesting.
And you're not looking at feral cats, just purely house cats.
Purely pet house cats, simply because it would be a little harder to capture feral cats and make them wear a harness and retrieve the data.
Have you noticed any differences when you're looking at cats in different kinds of settings? Like, are you getting people who are in the middle of cities versus suburbs versus out in the country?
So far, we've stuck in all the people that have done the cat tracking. It's just been urban and suburban areas. We haven't really had a lot of rural participants yet. So what we noticed between the two, though, is the suburban areas, particularly one of our participants that lives half their life in Maine and the other half in Florida on the coast. That cat's name is Ruckus, so people can look up the tracks later. The cat itself stuck really close to the home, but then started traveling along the beach side a lot compared to our urban cats that would typically just stick to 1 or 2 houses around them. They wouldn't go, venturing far off.
Well, you just mentioned something I didn't quite understand. So tell us about how people can go online and check out Ruckus's wanderings.
Oh, yeah. So we actually have our own website, cats.yourwildlife.org. That website has all of our cat participants there. You can see the cat tracking maps. It's through movebank.org, which tracks all sorts of animal wildlife and is open to the public. You just have to sign on, look at it. Through our website, you don't have to sign on. You can just click the cat tracks page, and it'll pop up with all our participants, all of the ones that are do-it-yourselves, Long Island, and our local Raleigh-Durham participants.
So what's so special about Long Island?
Unique because it's the only place in North America that coyotes have not been established. Last year there were a couple sightings, but as of right now there's no evidence that coyotes are breeding, that there's no permanent population in Long Island. And so we really want to see how that is affecting the cat's home ranges. How Troy mentioned earlier, we want to see if the cats are going into the forested areas, the parks and reserves. We can compare that with Long Island. Is it because there's no coyotes, or is it just because cats tend to avoid those areas? So it's a very, very unique study ground that we have. And I actually just got one cat track back today. So, yay, first one, super excited. It was interesting because it actually showed that the cat was not going into the forested areas. So it's definitely something that we're going to keep an eye on in the future cat track.
And what kind of mortality have you seen with have all the cats that you're tracking in North Carolina, have any of them been killed or predated that you know of?
Interesting about that. So none of the cats that we have tracked, like our past cats, have had anything happen to them. However, out of about 400 that have signed up, now the sign-ups are including Long Island and Do-It-Yourself, which is from all over the country and other parts of the world. Only 4 people have emailed us back saying that either the cat has gone missing or that a car has hit their cat.
You've got you've got sort of targeted. I mean, you're targeting Long Island, but you have sort of a targeted program and a DIY. Can you talk about the 2 different tracks?
Yes. So Cat Tracker itself, it started out as a local loaner program to just the Raleigh-Durham greater area within North Carolina. And from there, we've kind of started expanding slowly. Right now, we have a sister project over in New Zealand. So our New Zealand collaborators are doing their own project, and they'll be handing out like loaner units to people in New Zealand. Then now we've just expanded to Long Island. We've got other sister cat tracking projects for loaner parts that hopefully, cross our fingers, will be popping up within West Virginia, Connecticut, and California. In order to satisfy people that really want to participate in this, since it is a citizen science project and we want it available to everyone, we do have a do-it-yourself method, which just involves people signing up, filling out a questionnaire for the cat, and then buying these $50 GPS units, which are pretty cheap in our area. And you take these units, you put it on an H-style harness, and you just follow the directions that are on our website. You can watch the directions in our videos, and you can also email us because we're always there. And we help people through the do-it-yourself process, and they'll send us the information, or if we have a loaner program, we'll go out, track the cats ourselves, and then get the information back, and we send out to each participant their cat's own map of their tracks.
And how many total cats have you tracked so far?
So far, 60 cats.
Cool.
And that since April is pretty much when our whole program got started.
Oh, just April. Okay.
Not too bad.
No, it always makes me feel better when I haven't heard of something that is really recent, and then I don't feel so dumb for not having heard of it.
Oh, no. No, it really didn't get publicized until around April, once all of our IRBs and whatnot got passed, and then we started going through yourwildlife.org, which is a huge citizen science project area. So within that, we are hoping to track 1,000 cats. So that is our grand goal in this whole project.
Previous studies that involve cats and cat research, cat tracking, it's extrapolated from just the smallest studies. So we want to make it as large as possible, and we'll try and get there in a year. Yeah, I mean, right now, according to our director, we have the largest cat study all the cats. So 1,000 would be the largest cat study of all of the cat studies combined together.
You seem very concerned about how far they go and in terms of going into like wild areas, but in these suburban areas where you can actually have a fair amount of birds nesting in yards or migrating, and also the small mammals. I mean, in your opinion, do you think it's a wash in terms of like the wildlife that are in backyards that these cats are inhabiting compared to like the potential impact for, bigger green spaces, or do you think it's not really a concern about the backyard wildlife?
I think it depends on the region that these cats are in, because different regions have different endangered species or threatened species, and then you have to get into the fact, okay, well, certain areas, maybe, for like Raleigh, there's monarch butterfly areas. Say if cats were eating those, then that's still, a major impact. I mean, that's what's found around your house. If cats are eating lizards and songbirds, I mean, it can still decline those populations, even though they're not going into these wildlife, conservation habitats. Well, there is a small part of our project. It's not a huge portion right now. It's only about 15 participants, but we do diet collection or fecal collection for participants within the Raleigh-Durham area. We partner up with the Veterinary College of Medicine Sciences at NC State, and they do fecal floats and look over genetics and whatnot with the fecal samples that are collected. And then we're also sending them off to another research state that's analyzing the genomics of cats as well.
Yeah, I remember seeing something about the cat poop on your website. So
yeah.
That's a lot.
People sending us poop mail.
Oh, come on. Just have them fill it up real good. It'll be fine.
I think they would flag us.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to, interesting findings coming in so far that you want to share?
Well, I think what's interesting is cats have their own personalities. I mean, we know this, and that's what we're finding because it's shown in their movements. They're all highly varied. I mean, yes, generally they stick close at home, but there are some cats, like Chicha that I mentioned earlier, that takes these trips way off the grid. So, if it's just 10% of these cats that are doing that, then that's still a significant amount of cats that could affect a larger area of wildlife. So even though, yes, cats may stick, closer to home, there's still an outlier of cats, a significant portion that could affect more wildlife.
As you're doing this research, maybe it's stuff you don't know directly through your research and you found in other ways, but can you speak to ways that we should tell cat owners to help ensure their cats live in harmony with the other wildlife outside?
So this was an interesting question that you guys posed to us earlier. Actually, I've had quite a few people that we were talking about in our do-it-yourself participants, and some of them try the whole colored bib thing for birds. One participant said that totally changed the fact that she didn't see any kills. Not to say the cat didn't kill and he just didn't bring it to her, but she didn't see any while that was on. Personally, I think the only way to solve the whole wildlife issue is simply keep your cat indoors, If you want to let him out and, try to satisfy that wild side urge he's got going on, then why not build an outdoor enclosure that they can't escape from? I know a couple of people that have kind of built a tunnel through their attic out into the backyard. Granted, that takes some money, but to me, it's a better investment in my pet cat because I wouldn't have to worry, A, that the cat's going to get run over by a car, B, eaten by a coyote, or C, kill tons of wildlife in the process.
This is great, and I look forward to catching up with you when you get some more findings in and see where this is going.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thank you.
Ow! Citizen science!
I messaged Troy this morning, and she got back to me about some updates. So she said they're now up to about 140 cats tracked within 10 states in the U.S., and over 600 owners are signing up around the world. They've got, expansion on the Australian and New Zealand side of it, ramping up the Long Island efforts with 12 tracked and 15 more ready to get tracked very soon. They're shooting for 50 by the end of June, which is pretty soon. And then putting a priority on barn cats and cats that live in rural areas, which sort of outside our purview, but still interesting. And non-neutered cats. I guess that would be interesting to see differences between neutered and non-neutered cats. So then they've expanded tracking in Europe, and we'll throw some links in for those projects. Reaching out to owners of kleptomaniac cats, so cats that steal stuff. They want your cat burglars. And our favorite part, the poop mail, has not taken off.
That's rough.
I know it's rough, but they've discovered something cooler to study. You ready? So what they're doing is having people send in samples of the cat food and samples of the cat hair. So they can do, if I'm using the right word,
stable isotopes
analysis, exactly. They'll see if the cat hair mirrors what's in the cat food.
And if it doesn't, it means they're eating wildlife.
Exactly. Yeah. That is badass. I was really impressed by that.
That's awesome. Hey Nelson.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about tracking. How does tracking animals work, and what kind of data do you get from that, and how do you interpret it? So you rate these are GPS units.
On the cats, right?
Yeah, they put collars
GPS
on them. Yeah.
But you radio tracked these turtles, right?
Again, what we did was that when we found these turtles for the research, for the project to be able to analyze their diet, relocate them and get samples of them as much as we could in one season, we would put a transmitter and paste it onto their carapace using an epoxy.
Carapace means
on the top of their shell.
There.
Mind you, if a turtle's so small, the transmitters are made to be...
It's like the size of a hockey puck.
Yeah, the transmitters, they're about 100 grams, 100 to 110-ish grams.
Learn your metric!
and the transmitters are made to be less than 6% of their weight, so they can still move normally fine with them. And what we did was that we would then use a frequency number from that transmitter, and weekly we would recapture the turtles using an antenna that was attached to a transmitter, which we would put in the frequency in, and then as we got close to where the turtles were, by punching into that specific frequency using the antenna and this receiver, the receiver emits a sound, and the louder...
Beep, beep.
beep,
Yep.
beep, beep, beep.
And the louder and stronger the signal gets means that you're closer to the turtle. So then when you get close enough that you find it, you can either disattach the antenna and just use the wire itself to then pinpoint the turtle in the peat substrate that the turtles are usually found. Or
Peat substrate means like mud.
yeah, like
Well, it's-
muck.
Muck.
Like organic.
Yes, it's broken down sphagnum moss, right?
Yeah.
Peat.
So hopefully most of the time we were able to find the turtles and then put them in buckets. At least when it goes back to radio tracking, it's interesting to see the differences between tracking a turtle or reptile as compared to a mammal.
Well, in a
Yeah.
domestic mammal, it's like, I think anyone who listens to this who does tracking is going to be like, this is so easy. It's like the owner just like grabs the cat and puts the collar on it. It's not like you got to tranquilize a bear in the woods or like find a bog turtle under a root system. It's like, oh, hey, Fluffy, come here.
If I keep drinking some more of this vodka, you're gonna have tranquilized bear right here.
And it's interesting too because they can just obtain the collar. They can obtain the collar and all the GPS data is there. There's just so much more to collect
Oh, it makes it easy. Yeah.
than if you're studying, a reptile where that you have to go to that site whatever amount of times a week and locate it yourself instead of being able to obtain this data and create this huge sheet of all its movements, which is interesting and definitely makes it more convenient and able to collect more out of that, which is cool to see that project is starting to grow so much more in other countries.
And what I think is also neat about it is sort of the application of like what I'll call wild animal tracking techniques to quasi-domestic animal. And I think this is the point where you didn't mention this before.
Synanthropic organism.
Exactly. So our synanthropic organism of the episode is the domestic house cat. One of which is going nuts behind us.
The cute little black cat is just doing laps,
Bobo's like
jumping on the kitchen counter onto the
top of the cabinets.
yeah. And
Bobo's going nuts. In perfect timing, really, Bobo. You couldn't have done better. The idea that cats are pets, but also that the sort of the theories or hypotheses I've seen about cat domestication start with the idea of cats. Like some wild species, European wildcat, hanging around human encampments, human cities, or human towns, human settlements, and sort of becoming adapted to human settings, and then being brought into human households. And so you see that sort of wild, feral, domestic spectrum, even in cats in the United States. I'm sure, Tony, you got stories from I don't know. You see cats in Southeast Asia where you toured and like...
Oh, man. I mean, I don't know if I told the story already where, like, I'm in Bangkok and this is going to break your heart, Billy. I'm in Bangkok and, there's the tokay geckos. And they're like, gecko! And I really wanted to see one because I kept hearing it all over.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, oh, they breed in, like, my yard. And there's, like, a piece of, like, corrugated fiberglass. And he pulls it back and... They cement their, I don't know, saliva or whatever.
They cement their eggs to the
wall, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a bunch of babies that had hatched, and a Siamese cat, which is funny because we're in Thailand, a Siamese cat just bam whacks a gecko and just like eats it right. I was like, what? I'm like, this is crazy.
Synanthropic organism.
So on that note, we're going to shift. Troy made a slight mention in there about what can happen to outdoor cats, such as being eaten by a coyote. And so we're going to segue to a coyote researcher who, I mean, we got to be sensitive to this, is himself making clear that coyotes do not frequently eat cats. They are a small portion of their diet, but still that cats can be, and cat owner behavior can be influenced by the presence of coyotes. Hey, Tony, before we get into this, tell us your famous coyote story.
So, this is probably about 20 years ago. I was walking up to take the L shuttle back home from South Street, and I'm probably wearing a studded jacket and a bullet belt. And I'm walking up from South Street, which is where the punks hung out in the 90s. And I'm walking up 2nd Street, and this is about 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. So, and I see walking down Spruce, on the sidewalk of Spruce Street, I see a dog, about 30, 40-pound dog. And I'm like, that's a cool looking dog. Where's the owner? There's no owner. The dog keeps looking back at me, slinking down the road, looking back, his tail between his legs. And I'm like, that is a coyote. And this is like pre-internet. So I go home and I look in my books because I was still way in nature then. And I was like, wow, this is a coyote. And they even mentioned that they always keep their tail between their legs.
Yeah.
And, I have seen countless coyotes since then. Pennsylvania, Jersey, New York State, out west, all over out west. I've seen so many coyotes now, and it's absolutely a coyote was what I saw.
And this is, for context, where he saw it is one of the most urban areas of a big, densely populated city.
Right. I mean, this is like skyscrapers. This is the
high-rise apartment
this
buildings.
This is right, the colonial houses, but like the next block over it was Society Hill Towers. It was like this is like right in the heart of like.
This is not a forest. This is not like wooded backyards.
There's no backyards. This is tiny little colonial. Narrow colonial row, houses in cobblestone streets even. This is as urban as it gets.
What happened to the coyote after you saw it? What happened?
I just kept slinking down the street.
Yeah. Did it move at all, or just?
It was slinking down the sidewalk on Spruce Street.
Wow,
cool. And so with that we'll head into our interview.
Yes, my name is Chris Mowry. I'm a professor of biology at Berry College, which is located in Rome, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta. So I've been here for 20 years, and I've been studying coyotes for about 10 years in Georgia, as well as in Yellowstone National Park as well.
It's an interesting combination of perspectives, sort of in their sort of natural setting as well as where they've been expanding into.
So it's been fortunate to have that perspective, and I didn't necessarily set out to have that. It just kind of evolved into that, but yes.
How did you get into studying coyotes?
So I was here at Berry, and to be perfectly honest, I really did not know that coyotes were in the area. And when I first got here about 20 years ago, I was out one evening, and I heard these, strange sounds, which didn't really register with me at first. And then started to think, wonder what that is. It sort of sounds like coyotes, but I had not grown up with coyotes, so I wasn't all that familiar with them. But I think most people have some understanding or idea of what they sound like. And then I kind of realized that that's what it was, but again, didn't really think a whole lot about it. But it was a student who got me involved, who was interested in canids in general. He was sort of interested in pursuing what was going on with coyotes in this particular part of the world. He'd actually gone out and spent a summer in Montana, I believe, doing an internship with a guy who was studying wolves. So that kind of furthered his interest. He came back and asked me, hey, what do you think about us looking at coyotes? So we just started here on this 26,000 acres of land by doing very simple things like picking up scat and then setting out camera traps and then trying to induce howling and making some recordings, and then got into a little bit of analysis of those sounds that we were recording with some mathematicians, and just kind of built that up. And then this same student went out for another internship with an organization called the Yellowstone Ecological Research Center, which is based in Bozeman, Montana. And their director, Dr. Bob Crabtree, has been working in Yellowstone with coyotes for over 20 years. And so the student went out and worked with them. I got to be friends with them. They had me come out, and then they ended up providing radio collars for us. So we kind of here ramped up our studies and began to trap and radio collar coyotes on campus and started to follow them around. So, it just has kind of gradually built up over the years. Yeah, they were historically west of the Mississippi River. And so they started to come eastward for really for three reasons, all human-induced, of course. So the first was the eradication of their top predators, so wolves, and then habitat modification by humans. So, conversion of forested land to agricultural lands, and then also urbanization as well has also played into coyotes' favor. and then probably some translocations by humans, but maybe some of it's inadvertent, but there are certainly people that have brought coyotes from the West and released them for, again, a variety of reasons, mainly for hunting purposes or for training dogs to chase them around and, other kinds of things. So, you wipe out the predator, the natural predator, and you make habitat that is favorable to them, and it's just been a gradual progression eastward. And so now they're found, in all states, except for Hawaii, certainly all states in the east, and in all kinds of environments.
Someone's got to get on that translocation to Hawaii then.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure it won't be long.
What brings us to talk to you today is the phenomenon of coyotes in urban settings, and it's something that I hadn't really thought a whole lot about. I mean, in Philly, we'll talk about Tony's sighting in a minute, but that there's been evidence of them in what we might think of as the wilder areas around Philadelphia. But then when I've read about, let's say, the Chicago coyote populations and whatnot, that they seem to be comfortable in much more urban areas. Can you talk a little bit about how they behave, or where you see them in urban areas and how they behave, and what does an urban coyote act like and look like?
Yeah, well, the thing is that coyotes, as I say, are extremely adaptable animals. So they'll eat just about anything. So access to food, whether it's garbage, trash, dumpsters, bird feeders that are attracting rodents, crops, gardens, compost piles, all of these things can be food for a coyote. So, so again, you're talking really about an omnivore. And then you're talking about an animal that has a fairly short generation time. So they're seasonal breeders, coyotes are, and so they generally breed in the early winter time, and then there's a 2-month gestation period, and so you've got pups born in the spring. And those litter sizes can be fairly large. We've been watching a group in metro Atlanta of 7 pups that all seem to be doing well. We first saw them, I guess, about beginning of June, end of May. They are living it's a neighborhood, but it's a pretty urban neighborhood. And
May I ask I used to live in Atlanta. May I ask what neighborhood?
Yeah, it's in the Reynoldstown neighborhood, which is, so it's really just north of I-20 and west of the I-75-85 corridor. So, I mean, we're really talking about, very close to downtown Atlanta. So these animals, they potentially have lots of food. As I say, their generation times, I'm not talking about urban coyotes now. I'm just talking about coyotes in general, but they're theoretically, reproductively active in their first year. They can be. So they're born in the late spring. So by the time the winter time comes around, an individual is sexually mature and could potentially breed. Now, unless it has territory and a mate, that's not going to happen. So, how often that would happen, I'm not sure. It's hard to say. But point is that you can have lots of coyotes in a fairly short period of time. So if you think about that from an evolutionary perspective, their ability to adapt and for selection to act upon these populations can be a fairly rapid pace. And so, they become very adaptable around humans. They change their behavior. They generally go crepuscular, or are active at night, become more nocturnal to avoid interactions with humans. So they're very good at altering their behavior, at finding food, at really avoiding humans, but problem comes when they've overcome their fear of humans. So if they're being fed, whether it's intentionally or inadvertently being fed, or they have some reliable access to food, just like any other wild animal, and then that resource becomes interrupted or taken away. Now I've lost my fear of humans, and so now I'm going to find out what's going on, or I've come to associate humans with food, so I'm going to hang around here, hoping to find food, and that's when we maybe see problems with cats being taken or small dogs or things like that. But people have to remember that those are not natural food items for coyotes, and think that taking those kinds of prey is really something that develops over time. There's sort of this progression what has at times been referred to as a progression of aggression. And, generally coyotes are trying to avoid humans and just trying to live their lives. And so, again, are not aggressive and really want nothing to do with.
So I think part of why we find coyotes fascinating is their potential to eat outdoor cats. Tony, what do you think about that?
But I heard that there's a study that in urban areas, suburban areas that have a coyote population, there's higher bird populations because there's the idea that there's less cats because the coyotes are producing the cats.
And the study I think you're referring to is by Crooks and Soulier, and it was based in California in the San Diego area. I think that might be the study that you're referring to. And so they looked at chaparral patches, and they found that areas that had coyotes actually had higher bird populations because of this phenomenon of mesopredator release, or in other words, so it wasn't necessarily just cats, although cats were considered mesopredators, but the idea being that the presence of coyotes kept the population levels of these so-called mesopredators that might prey upon birds, ground nesting birds, usually it would probably be egg predation. And so you're right, it's keeping those numbers low, and so therefore the bird populations are able to increase. So yeah, coyotes often get a bad rap, and I'm certainly not I'm not trying to defend them or vilify them, either way. I'm just simply a scientist who's trying to learn more about them. But I think it's very important for people to realize that in many areas, particularly in the eastern U.S., these are relatively new animals to the ecosystem, and we don't know for sure how they behave and what effects they're having. What are their trophic interactions? What are they eating? It does cause a lot of concern and consternation among the public. So when we start talking about coyotes in urban areas, and when I say urban areas, I really mean urban and suburban areas where there are high population, human populations, you get a lot of mixed reactions. Some people really like it, and just the fact of seeing them, some people think that they have ecosystem benefits like I'm talking about, where they're controlling, rodent populations, for example, or, helping bird populations. Other people, are extremely concerned and think that they're affecting prey animals like deer populations and turkeys, and, so hunters get very upset about it, and then cat owners, pet owners as well. And we just really don't know. I would argue that the jury is still out. And it's just obviously going to depend on the location and the parameters that are going on within a particular area.
Chris, can you talk a little bit about the actual research project that you're doing in Atlanta?
Sure. Our interest is, first of all, to try to understand people's perceptions of and attitudes towards and experiences with coyotes in urban and suburban areas. So we're kind of targeting the metro Atlanta area right now. So we've started by a survey, instituting an electronic survey that we're distributing online that asks people those kinds of questions. What are your attitudes? And then starting to ask them questions about their personal experiences. Have you had an experience with a coyote? What was that experience? Hearing it, seeing it. Have you ever lost a pet? Have you ever been bitten by one? And on and on. Just collecting that kind of data right now, and then we're hoping to map that data. So working with GIS, looking at patterns of potential hotspots of activity. Let's say people living close to stream corridors or green spaces or things like that. That particularly see coyote activity. So we kind of felt like that was the place to start. And in fact, a study like this has gone on in the Denver metro area, and they're about 5 years ahead of us, and so they've been very good at sort of advising us. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Neat. Probably a great segue to if Tony were filling out that survey. Tony, tell us about your coyote sighting.
Yeah. Well, personally, I have no doubt that you did because, particularly, as I say, in the Northeast, they've been there for a while. We've been seeing them here in Georgia, for the past 20 years. As I mentioned, it was 20 years ago that I first started noticing them in this area. And so, you guys would have had them up there more than likely sooner than we did. And, as I said, I think once they've become established clearly they have become more prevalent. We see them in urban environments all the time, and certainly out in Chicago where they've been studying coyotes. Stan Gert has been studying coyotes for a number of years, has great stories of watching coyotes cross 7 major highways, in an evening. So, they really have no problem dealing with urban environment. They're smart animals, and they know how to avoid humans, and they know where to look for food. And as I say, there are lots of opportunities to look for food in an urban environment. So I really would think that you did see one.
Well, I do, and I'll mention all the things I'm curious about real quick. And we'll see if we can go there. I'm curious about, one is the urban coyote diet. Another thing I'm curious about is how they disperse through the urban environment, like what they train. Will they walk through streets, or will they tend to go by like streams or by railroads? And the other thing I'm really curious about is, I know that in Chicago they thought that when they actually studied them, they realized there's way more of them than they realized. I'm curious about their behavior versus in population and how well they can conceal their numbers.
I'll second all of those as good questions. Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so as far as the urban diet, again, all kinds of things to eat, trash and, pet food that is outside, and getting into dumpsters. And, we have found that bird feeders, again, that would attract rodents to the bird feeders would be a source of food. And things like roadkill, just collecting along the side of the road, would be an opportunity for something. Gardens, this group that we've been watching in town, Atlanta, we've got pictures of them up on their hind legs pulling figs off of a fig tree, believe it or not. Wow. So just ingenious little buggers, so you name it. Whatever they can find, they'll eat it.
How much of the diet is still hunted?
Good question. That's a good question, and I don't have a good answer to that. And so, that's something ideally we would like to look at. We might be able to detect that by scat analysis, but that's a good question. But, you would figure in an urban environment, rats around and things like that, I would suspect that there are still opportunities to go after small mammals. But as I say, we're watching this group of 7 right now, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how long they stick around, when, because we're routinely still seeing them, and when do we start to see dispersal? And I will say this is near a rail line, so it does have, it does provide them an opportunity for dispersals. So we'll hope to learn a little bit more about that. Yeah, I just read recently that, Chicago estimated 2,000. I don't dispute that. I really, as far as Atlanta, it's hard to say. Boy, it's just a hard thing to get a handle on because of the elusiveness of them and the fact that this is not a heavily studied animal, and they're recent immigrants to many of these ecosystems. And so I will say that something that we have noticed is that when people hear them, and this is really more in rural environments, but also, I guess in suburban environments, people will hear them howling at night sometimes in response to a siren or whatever. I know from personal experience it sounds like, oh, there's a dozen of them out there. Well, from some of the recordings and analysis we made, what sounded like a dozen or, many coyotes really ended up only being, 4 or 5 individuals. And from, again, what we know about their social groups, it is an alpha male and female and then those pups, but, they're not living in large extended family packs. Now, there can be offspring from the previous year that might stick around and help out, but again, from all that we know, they're not forming as large a groups as, say, wolves form. But again, this is part of the reason why we want to study them is because, we're talking about an animal in a new habitat that is fairly, recent.
All right, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for being our first collaborative guest.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to hearing a lot more about the research you're doing in Atlanta.
Well, that's great. Well, I certainly appreciate you guys tracking me down.
Since we recorded that in the beginning of the winter, I had an encounter with a dead coyote. where a buddy, herping buddy, and I were about to drive out of the town, and we were starting off in a neighborhood called Germantown, cutting through basically Mount Airy and into Roxborough. These are northwest Philly neighborhoods.
It's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful section of Philadelphia. So
like a lot of row houses with a big wooded park in the middle called the Wissahickon. And we were...
It's an absolutely gorgeous park.
Gorgeous park. So we're crossing over a bridge that goes over the park, Walnut Lane Bridge. And we get to the base of it, and like we're driving, and we're like, "That's a dead coyote! Pull over!" So we hop out of the car. We took pictures. I showed it around. They're gory pictures. We're still going to post it to the website because it's a badass picture. And the thing was like streaming like scarlet red blood, so it was like very freshly hit.
Viewer discretion advised.
Right. So younger viewers might not want to look at this. But it was interesting because there's no debating it was a coyote, and we got good pictures of it because it was dead. And I was emailing with some wildlife officials. Basically, the idea, the lesson is that there have been spotty sightings around the city. They're getting more common, and there are now they're documented. Like family groups raising pups, let's call it further out in the fringes of the city, but still like with the Wissahickon as a big creek corridor park is like sort of a channel like right through northwest Philly.
Yeah, but this park starts, it goes from the Northwest Avenue is the border of Philadelphia, Montgomery County. It's a really steep gorge. Stream valley that goes from the border of Philly, Montgomery County to almost center city.
And Montgomery County is still suburbs. What other places would be more? We're snobs here. What other places would call urban for sure, but still we call it the suburbs.
Yeah, like Raleigh looks like
Montgomery County.
Yeah, it looks like Montgomery County.
Yeah, so this was undoubtedly a coyote in Philly. They're breeding more and more. It's interesting to see what happens as they really get more embedded and entrenched in the city.
Mm-hmm. We talked about it. There's the coyotes out east aren't pure coyotes. They have wolf and dog DNA in them.
Yeah, I finally watched that documentary, the Coy Wolf.
Cool. Yeah.
And so if you look at and this is something we talked about with Chris, the ones in Atlanta, they don't seem much. They're not bigger. They're right. And so the idea is that the coyotes that they see in the Northeast and like in Canada picked up, I gotta get this right, timberwolf genes.
Well, maybe
not gray wolf, but timberwolf,
gray wolf are they're synonyms.
No, but there's two species of wolf.
Algonquin wolf.
Algonquin wolf.
Eastern Canada wolf, Algonquin.
Thank you. Okay.
Wolves from like Manitoba west and also maybe south of the Rockies into Mexico are like Canis lupus proper, like gray wolf.
Right.
And it seems like there's evidence to support that notion that wolves from southeast Canada are different species of wolf. And they might actually be the same species as the red wolf of the south.
Reading the same thing. Yeah.
So,
and then that the coyotes are more closely related to our eastern wolves than to the western wolves, so that as they have expanded east, they've encountered more genetically close relatives and been able to interbreed with them.
Right.
But those coyotes are the ones sort of, if you think of like a big line coming from the west through Canada down to the northeast and mid-Atlantic United States, the ones that are also been expanding straight west from further south, where they wouldn't be encountering those wolf populations they could interbreed with. So you might have so that's all consistent with Chris talking about how the ones they're observing aren't much bigger, and so that they might just be straight up coyotes. In any case, coyotes like strictly coyotes, interbred coyotes, like they all seem to do pretty well in cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The idea is that they're hitting that an urban environment is a rich ground for coyotes.
Right. I think we got off track about that. We're talking about the Wissahickon Park, which is
sure.
It has it's a beautiful immersive experience when you're there. You're like it feels like you're almost in the mountains. And you were probably thinking, oh, maybe these coyotes are there hunting, deer hunting. They might just be denning in these areas and feeding in garbage and eating squirrels. They might be they might be foraging in the streets.
Yeah.
And actually just denning in there, or a combination of the two is more
probably
likely.
easier pickings behind a Wawa than it is like hunting rabbits.
And if people don't know around the country / world, Wawa is the greatest convenience store.
Where are you from?
I'm from Jersey, so
there
we have
you go.
a lot of Wawas by us. We have a lot of Wawas by us.
You're
And
not arguing
I will
with
have
that,
to agree with that.
I mean, if you go on the Wawa, you would never want to go to a 7-Eleven ever again.
Ever. Oh no! All I wanted to say earlier, because I know we got on our Wawa track, is that with coyotes as well, we're talking about what they could be eating. Is that because they're so adaptable and they're both behaviorally found to be active both at night and during the day. For all we know, they could be hunting a lot at night when there's less people around and going for small mammals or anything that they can find.
Absolutely,
yeah.
I think that's a given.
I think we're gonna wrap up. We're gonna thank Nelson.
Thanks for having me here tonight, guys.
We sort of invite these people who know nothing about this podcast, and we're not the wolves, but we sort of throw them to the wolves.
We throw them to the coy wolves.
To the coy wolves. So for the next episode, we're thinking we're gonna hit urban squirrels, and particularly the project squirrel out of Chicago, and learn a little bit more about the history, the present of squirrels in cities, and some neat research into that.
Track coyotes ever do. But you talk a lot about modeling.
I brought it up, yeah, because I was sort of thinking of it like seeing a lot of articles that seem to be like, hey, we assume this, and this, and plug it into a model and see what happens.
Oh, I thought you were talking. I was wondering about Nelson when it comes to modeling.
Oh my god!
Because
he's a good-looking guy.
Nelson is extremely. He's probably the handsomest guest we've had so far.
He's the handsomest guy in the room right now, for sure.
Without a doubt. and recently, I had the pleasure of seeing him with his shirt off.
Oh my god!
Because we went
little pool party.
We had a pool party, and
is Nelson the kind of guy that looks for any excuse to take his shirt off, or is he like?
Well, we were swimming.
You were all swimming. Okay.
And he took it off as we got to the pool, so he wasn't walking around the whole. So he's modest.
He was all hunked out.
Yeah.
All right.
He's like, question your sexuality, good looking.